Welcome to INN CEO Talks. In this episode, we're talking to Steve Cope, the CEO of Silver Viper, which trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol VIPR and on the OTCQB as VIPRF. Silver Viper is a mineral exploration company focused on the acquisition and advancement of high-quality, early-stage projects. The group's aim is to build value through discovery and deposit definition with the goal of attracting the interest of senior resource companies looking to acquire advanced mineral properties. Joining me now is Steve Cope. Steve, it's good to have you back. The last time that we spoke, which was in August, the price of gold had risen to about $2,000 mark and silver was up as well. You were ramping back up at that point, but we were still just coming out of a world that was adjusting to COVID. So what's happened since then, and where are we going from here?
Yeah, thanks, Stu. It's always a pleasure to be on the show, and it seems like every time we chat, there's some big development within our project, but there's a lot has happened since we last spoke. The first would be the discovery of an additional new lode at El Rubi that sits 100 meters to the west of our main El Rubi structure. And what that zone really started to show was the potential of open pit heap leach mining at El Rubi to go along with the high grade, main El Rubi structure. Since then, we've been following up on that. We've continued to expand Rubi. We've started to expand that new western zone. And then, just this week, we put out the highest grade assay to date on the project by far. But the whole above and beyond that high grade assay, which will, grabbed everyone's attention when you're seeing over 10,000 grams per ton silver and over 700 grams per ton gold, which is one of the best assays I've seen in precious metals around the world as a singular assay. But what was more important is that sat within the main El Rubi structure, but it was our widest area to date. It sat in a zone that ran 19.3 meters of over 20 grams gold and over 300 grams silver. And then before that, earlier in the hole, we hit 130 meters of 18 grams silver and 0.69 gold, which is really that, juicy open pit heap leachable rock. On top of that, since we last spoke, we did metallurgy, and lo and behold, it showed us that this rock leaches very well, both the gold and the silver. So a lot of developments, and the company's come a long ways again in that time frame, and we're excited to keep going.
Wow. So what does keeping going look like? With results like that, are you revising your plans? And if so, in what direction are you moving?
Well, it's exploration. You're always, have to revise and adapt to, what you see. And obviously that particular zone and section of El Rubi, our geologist has interpreted as a down drop block. And so that's changed the modeling and how they're going. And so they're going to attack that section from a couple of different angles to, expand that above and below that intercept. That particular deep high grade intercept that was the 10,000 gram, that was actually the deepest intercept to date on El Rubi. And one of the other kind of unique things about it is that we also had those high grade lead and zinc numbers associated with it, which we haven't had anywhere else. And so one of the instant theories when you see that is that you're getting close to a feeder, or you're getting close to a feeder. With seeing it as a broader zone, seeing those base metals number pick up, seeing gold and silver obviously spike to those spectacular numbers. They're going to test some of that theory. They're going to, and like I said, they'll drill above it, they'll drill below it, they'll attack it from a couple different angles. But the nice thing about this discovery of the western zone and having the main El Rubi structure 100 meters apart is we've been able to drill and go through both zones when we're drilling from the west back to the east. And that, again, this was a hole higher up that encountered a bunch of that western stringer zone as well, above that 130 meters. And then as you go deeper, we get into the main El Rubi structure.
As we stated in the intro, your long-term objectives are not to build out the mine, but to attract partners or joint venture or to vend in. Are you already starting to see interest from, appropriate parties?
There's definitely, what's kind of happened with COVID is it's limited a lot of those people from doing the process that they would naturally go through. And obviously a big part of that is doing site visits. And most companies have been shut down on that front, limiting personnel to only, essential activities within the company themselves. But even prior to this release, actually, have been interesting. The last couple of weeks leading up to it, we had A number of groups have approached us. They're requesting site visits in the short term. I think it's only going to pick up as this news settles in, and some of the other producers out there see, again, that we're expanding the zone and just showing the potential of what Rubi and the rest of the project can do. So I think this is going to be a big year for M&A in our sector, especially on the silver side. There's just not a lot of quality exposure out there. With the juniors to silver, I put us certainly at the top of most lists as far as ones that are prime, M&A candidates, even though it's probably earlier stage than those companies that traditionally would act, in the last 10 years when we were in a bear market. But their pipelines are dry. There's a lot of pressure on them to replace the reserves. The silver production worldwide is going down year by year for the last little bit. So we're hearing that there is a lot of pressure on those companies, and we're starting to see, them pay attention and get a little more aggressive here. So I think we're in, hopefully if metals prices cooperate, I don't know if we need them to cooperate when you start putting out grades like that, but if they do continue to cooperate, I think those, our shareholders will certainly benefit from that, and hopefully we get to that point where we are in a takeover.
Well, that leads to my next question, which in some ways may be redundant based on everything that you told me. But, one of the reasons that people watch these interviews is they're trying to determine, is now the time for me to put my money into a company like Silver Viper? What do you say to them?
Well, if your risk appetite is on the junior space, absolutely. There's certainly been a revival amongst the silver bugs and people and new investors looking at silver. We had publicly, obviously, the Reddit crowd and what happened with GameStop, and then there was kind of the spin-off group from that certainly started targeting silver and looking at it. The talk of the silver squeeze. We've seen people rushing to buy the physical bullion, to where a lot of the bullion banks are, either out of the metal or charging, really high premiums and buying even the metal back above spot in a lot of cases. So there's been a lot of attention on that, on the physical side, and SLV, and this idea of, attacking the SLV in the short position there and trying to force people to deliver silver. And then, of course, we all saw that rule changed overnight and went, they're now, basically said, due to the limited supply of silver, they're not going to be, promising to pay people back in ounces, and we'll pay you back in currency, which should have made bigger headlines around the world. But again, we understandably why it didn't. But there's a lot of eyes on silver. If you're, and obviously the further down the poll you go as far as the company side, that's where you have the opportunity for the bigger gains. When you're looking at juniors, you start looking at them with the hope of, 10 plus baggers, and but if your risk appetite is less, then maybe you're more focused on the producers because they tend to outperform the metal as it goes up, or maybe you just want to be secure and buy the metal itself, or maybe it's a balancing act of all. So I would say, I'm not providing, financial advice to anyone, but understand your own risk profiles. But I would, I personally am probably much higher invested in the junior space because it's what I know. But I think for me, it makes a lot of sense to at least have a portion of your precious metals exposure in your portfolio to be in the juniors. And, again, if you do that, focus on good management groups with a track record of success with a high quality project. And you only need 1 or 2 out of 10 to be a big win, and you make a lot of money. It's kind of the general rule in the junior space.
Right. Well, you mentioned that there's a lot of eyes on silver, but I think there's a lot of eyes on Silver Viper at the moment as well. We're out of time right now, Steve. Thanks for this update. It sounds quite exciting, and hopefully we can have a further conversation in a couple of months. Thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it, Stu. It's always fun.